Welcome to From Chaos to Code, Rebuilding the Iron Mind, where we talk about the real side of men's health. Not the Instagram highlight reel, not the fake stoicism, but the honest effects that happen when life hits you harder than any workout ever could. I'm your host, Ricardo, and I've lived a few different lives. Teacher, property manager, MMA promoter, garage mechanic, handyman, empath. I've been the man everyone leans on, the one who fixes things. Until the weight of it all almost broke me. Here, we want to talk about what that really costs. When being the strong one becomes survival instead of strength. How burnout, silence, and pride slowly eat away at you until you realize you've built armor so thick that you can't even breathe under it. This isn't about weakness, it's about rebuilding. Learning that real strength isn't about how much you can carry. It's about knowing when to set it down. So let's start there, with the cost of being the strong one and what it actually takes to reclaim your iron mind. Now, this is going to be a 3-part episode. I tried to put it into one, but it just got so intense that I realized there's no way we could discuss all of this in one singular episode. I wouldn't be able to convey what I want to convey in one 15-minute span. And at the exact same time, why would I shortchange everyone who's listening? Now, I don't want to record this episode. Even the thought of it is giving me a little bit of stress, but that's because what I have to do first is I have to set the personal tone with aspects I've been through. One of my friends told me one time that he finds that when people are talking to me, I always share something personal. Not overshare or trying to look for some sort of dramatic aspect, but I share that personal aspect, he realized, because what I'm trying to do is open the door for people to also share should they choose. I'm going to stay away from using a term like creating a safe space or something of that sort. No, what I'm doing is I recognize other strong individuals and I have learned the need for them to speak up also. So my hope in sharing is that other people learn to share also with those that are already strong. Or maybe at the moment, think that they aren't. And that's where the whole entire title of these podcasts come into play, including our main branding, From Chaos to Code. So, this very first portion is going to be about my trials and tribulations in a couple of relationships where I let boundaries slide. So ultimately, we're going to move towards learning how to establish correct boundaries and also how to recognize the psychology of abuse when it comes down to it. It's funny, my other friend told me today that when it comes to bad relationships, they spice up your life once in a while. It's all good. It could be worse. You could also be in a super safe, stagnant, boring relationship. So I really appreciate that optimistic viewpoint in all of this. Now, this initial one might go a little bit over 15 minutes, but that's okay. We are setting the tone for a learning curve. Now, what background do I have? Well, I tried to articulate my background in relationships before, and I said that I attract broken people. Or maybe I'm attracted to broken people. Then I realized that's not really an accurate description. No, I attract people who are attracted to my strong self-regulation. Them not having self-regulation or choosing to lean on me for self-regulation isn't in my control. But how much I give and what boundaries I set will set the tone for how much energy expenditure is being given or reciprocated. Now, I'm sure everyone's been in some sort of relationship, a friendship, romantic relationship, maybe even a familial relationship where there's that idea of moving goalposts. Where it seems as if no matter what you do, you can't achieve this goal the individual has set out. And eventually they become disappearing goalposts. And you're spending so much of your time and energy trying to fill that person's cup that yours isn't even being filled. But at the exact same time, it's almost as if yours is now a sieve. There's a hole in the bottom of your cup. So no matter what happens with the rest of your life, you just can't seem to fill it, and you're getting stressed to the point where the bottom of your cup seems as if it's cut right out. This is where we come to our 3-part episode. What I learned from losing myself, recognizing, and rebuilding boundaries. Episode 1. What that relationship taught me about boundaries and self-respect. Now, what I've found in relationships that start off very intense is I found that I'm mistaking that intensity for connection. So early in a couple of relationships that I've been in, I've confused early emotional intensity for compatibility. I'm an intense person. I figured that their intensity matched mine, and because it matched mine, that was a compatibility aspect. What that did is it caused me to ignore red flags disguised as passion. Instead of jealousy, they were territorial. Instead of controlling, they had standards. Inasmuch as they tried to present it as passion, I also mistook it as passion, and it caused a rapid attachment, albeit not exactly a healthy one. So I found that I was always being tested in order to prove I care. So what eventually happened in the beginning, and it was nuanced and subtle, is there was an erosion of boundaries. Now, I have an issue with boundaries. More explicitly, I have an issue with boundaries in relationships. With everybody else, I have extremely firm boundaries, and if you cross them, I absolutely fight back, and I will not budge. But I've realized that one of my problems with romantic relationships is that because I'm trying to have a different, softer side inside these relationships, what happens is that I don't recognize when I'm giving up my boundaries, and I'm sure a lot of people don't either, inside of specific relationships. It's almost like a people-pleasing mindset, where I want peace over truth. I don't want to fight with my partners, so I mistook avoiding conflict for keeping harmony. Therefore, if there was conflict that should have happened, I decided to put it on the back burner, or I decided to ignore it completely because I was keeping harmony in the relationship. One of us had to. So I started to make early excuses when there was an overreaction, and a legitimate overreaction, not my interpretation of it. I told myself, well, they just have emotion. They just have passion. Instead of seeing these emotional outbursts as red flags for control. And these small tests of control start to feel like care. Checking who you speak to. A little bit of guilt when you go out. Mainly because they're just concerned. or they want you to themselves, and it feels like care. Once again, the nuance of those small tests of control, you usually don't articulate because you're in this relationship bubble. You're a little blinded by it. And I found my issue afterwards was that I was over-explaining myself. Normally, I don't need to explain myself to anyone. I do what I do, and I have the confidence that I'm doing it within a very moral standpoint. Not just my interpretation of morals, but what I know is right. However, I found that I was defending every single move I was making instead of realizing I didn't need to justify my basic adult autonomy. I've been told that I'm too independent. Now, too independent doesn't mean I won't lean on anyone for help. It's something I've had to overcome over the years. But in this articulation, inside a couple of these relationships, it's been used to make me dependent on the other person. And then you get this sort of emotional chaos that starts to happen inside the relationship, but you confuse that connection with intensity. You're mistaking emotional chaos for passion and depth because there's an energy behind it, but it's the wrong kind of energy. What happened here? I missed a boundary. I didn't slow the pace or demand respect for personal independence early on. Therefore, I set the tone for more erosion of my own boundaries. The effect is that I set the precedent that my partner's emotions dictated the pace, not a mutual comfort between us. And what was the quick lesson I learned with this one eventually? Well, fast attachment often hides fear and control. Real connection takes time and boundaries. What happened next was the control creep, the erosion of independence. It got to the point where I almost subtly began seeking permission for normal things. Seeing friends, attending events, even making certain personal choices. And I wasn't outright seeking permission. There's no way I would have consciously done that. But it comes where you're almost wondering if you have to give the time to the partner first. You have a little bit of free time on a Saturday. You know your friends are doing something, or you know there's a special event or something you want to do yourself, but you give your time to them first and let them decide. You allow their emotions to determine your actions. Well, if I do this, she'll probably be upset. Not upset because you're doing something wrong, because upset that they are losing control. So gradually you start to lose privacy. You start to lose privacy through your texts. You might give up social media, and you feel that your routines are becoming monitored or criticized. In other words, you have to run your regular everyday routines by them to ensure that there's this peace, because only when there's a peace do you somewhat have calm in your life. What happens afterwards is there's this normalizing aspect of control. And once again, I say control, but not so blatant that you can articulate it. It's just you have given up boundaries to the point where this person now controls your life. And this starts to happen when you are becoming isolated. They might express some discomfort with your friends or coworkers, or what was tried with me was with my family. And that eventually dictates who you see. You slowly start to pull away from certain people or at certain times because you just don't want to deal with all the issues that could rise forth. There becomes a communication imbalance, and it's a control aspect too. If you find that you are carrying every conversation, every apology and they're only communicating to accuse you or berate you, well, that's a control method also. One of the other methods I found that's being used in these relationships is affection becomes a weapon. Affection becomes completely withheld unless you perform perfectly for that other person. And you find that you start to tolerate that. Unless I do A, I don't get B for affection. You find that you're losing personal time. You find you're constantly checking in order to prevent conflict. And the more you stop doing things for yourself, the less conflict you have. And it feels like a reprieve from all of this, but it's not. It's you giving up your boundaries. And finally, you fall into that aspect of walking on eggshells. You rewire your day around avoiding these triggers, start second guessing your tone, your timing, your actions, writing and deleting and rewriting text messages. It becomes tiring. And the result of this is that you start to form some sort of emotional dependency. You begin thinking that your peace depends on their mood. And here we have a classic trauma bond loop. And I don't use that term lightly. Once again, I do not have a psychology or a therapy background, but I have seen both in order to be able to find articulations for this. So in this period in the relationships, my missed boundary was I failed to protect my personal autonomy, my time, my decisions, my friendships, all eroded. And the effect of that was a development of anxiety around simple daily chores, around simple daily choices. You feel like you're walking on eggshells all the time. So the eventual lesson I took away from this is that autonomy isn't selfish, it is essential. Any partner who punishes independence is not a partner. My brother summed it up at one point too. He said there's your life, there's her life, and there's the relationship. And if those three pieces aren't filled completely, then you don't have that relationship. So what eventually happened in these relationships is I found that I was becoming the emotional management. I became the emotional regulator. I took responsibility for my partner's emotions. If I just stay calm, she'll calm down. At first, it didn't seem like a sort of martyrdom. It seemed as if I was acting in the best interest of the relationship. You find that you're apologizing for things you didn't do just to keep the peace, and you mistake conflict avoidance for emotional maturity. I'll say that again. I mistook conflict avoidance for emotional maturity. I wasn't trying to be the bigger person, so to speak. I was just thinking that if I put this relationship first and suppressed my own needs for this, that I was helping it in the long run, when in reality, it was destroying myself. Eventually, we come to the point where there's the decline. My boundaries completely collapsed. It's a sort of self-betrayal. You're staying silent to keep the peace when you're accused or degraded. You over-rationalize the abuse. You know, I caught myself right there. I didn't want to use that word. It has such a connotation to it that I felt weak almost saying it. But it's not me inviting abuse. It's that person trying to abuse. So once again, this is me moving from chaos to code. If I can articulate that to everybody who's listening, then I'm articulating it to myself. So let's go back to that note I have. I was over-rationalizing abuse. I thought if I just explained myself better, my partner would understand, they would calm down, and I'd be able to rationalize my way towards love and understanding. It never happened, by the way. All that happens eventually is physical and emotional exhaustion, sleep disruption, hypervigilance, constant adrenaline. Your body's living in survival mode. Now, those of us who have had some extreme experiences in lifestyle, you've had these issues happen. You've had them happen in multiple different ways. And to be able to finally calm down from that or have some sort of peace is unbelievable. So when you don't have that peace in a romantic relationship, it permeates every other aspect. You start to almost lose your identity. You forget your own opinions because you're living reactively instead of intentionally. There's this fear of reaction. You anticipate punishment for normal behaviors. If you're checking your phone, if you're late, if you're talking to others, including friends or family. So I realized that my major missed boundary was I failed to separate my partner's emotional storms from my own stability. Those partners that I experience this with, their emotional storms are their issues. That's for them to weather. It's not my job to stabilize those emotional storms. The effect of this was I had this chronic guilt because I couldn't solve everything. There was this exhaustion and this loss of authenticity that was happening. What's the lesson? As I shift here uncomfortably. You're not someone's therapist. You're not their punching bag. You're not their emotional babysitter. A healthy man protects his peace. Now, there's a public mask that happens with this sort of thing. You start to isolate and feel shame in public. You hide the dysfunction from friends or family because you want to protect your partner's image. You're loyal to them, but that loyalty is hiding problems. You stop seeking support because you didn't want to appear weak. You don't want to appear disloyal. And a strong person, they are neither weak nor disloyal. However, if you're justifying their behavior internally instead of confronting it, then all that's going to do is you're going to collapse your own support system. Now, my support system around me didn't collapse. I just chose not to engage with it. So I made the mistake of thinking that I no longer had a support system or that it was distant because I was pushing them away. My support system was still there. They were still strong. We were still strong. You just have to reach out and make sure you're engaging with them. What was my missed boundary? I didn't allow myself to have witnesses or a support system for what was going on in a difficult time in my life. What was the effect? I became isolated. I second-guessed my own reality. I developed this anxiety and guilt constantly that I couldn't articulate. Here's the lesson. Isolation is the abuser's oxygen. the more they can isolate you towards what they are trying to craft and the control they're trying to craft, the more it almost gives them a dopamine. You need witnesses to stay grounded in truth. Now, I'm here to tell you, in a much long-winded episode than I expected, that of course this came to a breaking point. I woke up and I started to reclaim exactly what's mine. I realized that every attempt at peace was met with new control or blame. Every time I tried to reach these goalposts, they seemed to move and eventually they disappeared. And I know that there is no way that's a realistic aspect. I hit complete emotional exhaustion. I had no energy left to fix what only my partner could fix. And when I hit that complete emotional exhaustion, I wasn't trying. And that actually allowed me to see clearly. I recognized patterns. I recognized these patterns as control, not love. I was so tired I didn't have the capacity to lie to myself and say that this is love anymore. And I woke up. I saw the pattern. I saw that no amount of explaining or fixing changed any of her reactions. I saw the cost tally to myself. I realized I was emotionally drained, anxious, isolated, constantly guilty, probably amplified by that good Catholic upbringing. And so what did I do? I chose self-respect. When I ended contact, I broke that cycle. And I ended it decisively. I blocked all contact. Of course, there was immediate backlash. There was escalation, calls, emails, guilt, trying to show up. All that did was confirm the control dynamic. Once they try to control everything and you see it, well, hindsight is always the clearest. And then, of course, you go to your support system and you look for that external validation. Friends and family confirmed what I'd normalized was not normal. It was emotional abuse. Once again, I hate using that word. It's such a gross word to me because it makes me feel weak when I say it. But the fact that I am here and having this discussion, albeit one-sided, articulates that has no effect on me anymore. I finally set a boundary. I ended the relationship without debate. No in-person drama, no open door for discussion. What was the effect? Well, the immediate effect, complete anxiety and guilt, wondering if you did this correct, wondering if you could have done it a different way. But also, you get those first breaths of freedom and clarity. Here's the lesson. Closure isn't a conversation. You don't have to have this long, drawn-out, hours, days, weeks, months of conversation. It's a decision. You do not need permission to walk away from anything. What's the aftermath of all this? Well, there had to be a little bit of detox and rewiring. Of course, there was some initial panic from breaking that trauma bond, a little bit of guilty feelings, bad dreams, physical stress still happening, and you realize your nervous system has been hijacked by constant threat response. In future episodes, we're going to talk about the biochemistry behind that sort of constant threat response and hypervigilance and what it does to your body and stress when you can't let that go. So you have to begin retraining your body to feel safe again. And I don't mean a physical threat. I mean safe to act as you're normally supposed to act, with gym, family, quiet, routine. And once you've been through that, then you start to have this withdrawal and clarity. There's a little bit of cognitive dissonance. You start to reflect on the good times, even knowing that that partner was toxic. Classic trauma bond detox. You still get a little bit of phone anxiety, conditioned fear response to notifications. You think if you're getting a text or a phone call, it's going to be some sort of contact. All that is proof that your nervous system was hijacked. You have to learn to deprogram this sort of guilt. Feeling guilty doesn't mean you did something wrong. It's just your empathy being exploited. I'm going to say that again because I really want to articulate that. Feeling guilty doesn't mean you did wrong. It's just your empathy being exploited. Now, once again, for you assholes out there, don't try and use that line if you're actually being an asshole. However, if you are empathetic and you have been exploited, you need to reclaim that independence, re-engage with your friends, your hobbies, your family, take back control of the narrative of your life. No one controls your life but you. What's my boundary now with any of these individuals? No contact in all forms. Absolutely not. Nothing. Even polite contact is re-entry for them to try to manipulate and control. They do not deserve a single second of my time. What's the effect of this? My sleep has never been better. I have mental space for myself, my humor has come back, and I recognize that my self-respect has come back. I went from chaos back towards the code that I know is my code. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing is remembering yourself. So from this, what did I learn? Well, I learned that I'll never compromise again. When I'm looking for relationships, early intensity does not mean real connection. When it comes to masculinity, when it comes to a strong man, autonomy and boundaries are masculine strength. Not emotional distance. If you find that you're being extremely cold, withholding, that's not masculinity. Being independent, being self-sufficient, and being able to articulate boundaries are where strength comes into play. If somebody is giving me communication without respect, that's manipulation. I'll never allow that. And if I can only find peace at the cost of my self-worth, it's too expensive. Now, what did I learn from this? I learned that a healthy relationship complements my life. It doesn't consume it. And a strong man protects his time, energy, and sanity first. That's the love of self. Now, this is part 1 of a 3-part series. Once again, our usual podcast take about 15 minutes. In this case, we're at it a bit longer, but I have to set the tone for everything that we're about to discuss coming up with boundaries. That's it for today's episode of From Chaos to Code, Rebuilding the Iron Mind. If something in this hit you, take a second to sit with it before you scroll away. Write it down, apply it, share it with a brother who might need to hear it. The whole goal here isn't perfection, it's progress. Real men doing the real work of getting stronger, clearer, and more grounded every day. If you want to keep these conversations going, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen. And if you want to stay around after the episode, I'll be releasing tracks I've made using my own writing and AI music development. Each episode will feature a new track in a variety of genres that I use to express myself. Keep the chaos in check and keep the code alive. I appreciate all of you. Thanks for listening.
I reached too far, you barely moved. I spoke in fire, you stay smooth. Messages dropped straight to the void. I lit the room, you just enjoyed. Too much skin, too much soul. I played real, you played control. No more chasing what won't stay. No more games I didn't play. If silence breaks this, let it break. I gave too much, that was my mistake. I ain't too much just to expose. Now I pull back, watch it implode. You didn't ghost, you hovered near, close enough to blur the fear. I fed the flame, you watched it die. Half a nod was your reply. I hold the line, no shake, no slip. No sugar words, no tender grip. I match your tone, I match your pace. I take my hands out of this space. Cut your name from how I breathe. You wanted less, now you got me. No more chasing what won't stay. No more shrinking just to play. If silence kills it, let it bleed. What you ignore ain't up to me. I ain't too much, I'm just awake. My silence hits like your mistakes. I hold the line, you'll feel it when it's gone.